Hey everyone, this is Mike, and today I'm going to be doing the rotation guide for Dragoon. Now, very quickly, as a little bit of a disclaimer, Dragoon is one of the jobs that I haven't really been able to gear yet because I've been spending my gear on other stuff like Ninja and my casters. So my Dragoon's gear is really shit, and because of that my skill speed is also a little bit different than I would like it to be, and because of that I'm either gonna have to clip my jumps into my GCDs, or I'm gonna have to be delaying my jumps in order to make the rotation work. Because of that, you're going to be seeing that my buffs and my raid buffs are sometimes going to start misaligning with my jumps because I'm delaying them so much. But just know that because my GCD is kind of crap and doesn't align with my jumps, that's kind of why I am delaying them and why the rotation looks a little bit weird here and there. But no, that's just, I could technically fix this by using my buffs and raid buffs later. But delaying raid buffs is something that I don't like to do, because then you're basically screwing over your whole party just to gain some extra personal DPS. So that's why I'm using my raid buffs on cooldown, even though it technically isn't that great for my personal DPS, because my GCD is just a little bit screwed. So that's kind of why certain parts in the rotation are going to be looking a little bit weird. It's because I can't use my jumps on cooldown because it doesn't align with my GCD. So if I had a better skill speed here, it would look a lot better, but that's just the way it is. My Dragoon doesn't have gear, so that's why it looks a bit weird. Now let's get into Dragoon and its rotation. So Dragoon works very simple, and its GCD rotation is probably the easiest to learn out of all of the melee DPS. So let's take a look at the GCD rotation first. We have two main combos. We have our Chaos Thrust combo and our Full Thrust combo. And because the way how it works, basically you're going to be alternating between these two combos at all times. Of course, if you have a fight with two bosses, like for example in Ultimate, the first two phases have two bosses, it is more optimal to use your Chaos Thrust combo twice instead of using your Full Thrust, but every now and then you do want to use your Full Thrust combo for when your Life Surge comes up. So if you have a two target situation, there is a little bit more to optimize, but in a normal one target fight, you're basically always going to be alternating between the Chaos Thrust combo and the Full Thrust combo. Life Surge is also a skill that we're always going to be using on Full Thrust, no questions asked. Full Thrust is the high single target combo, that like single target action that we have, meaning that Life Surge is best used on that. Technically Chaos Thrust has more potency, but Chaos Thrust does its potency through a dot. And the dot is not affected by Life Surge, so we're always going to be using Life Surge on Full Thrust. Now, outside of that, we have three buffs and raid buffs. We have Battle Litany, which is our raid buff that we give to everyone, which is on a 3-minute cooldown. We have Dragon Sight, which is a raid buff that we can give to one target. If you want to know which target is the best to give it to, there is a website called Dragon Tether or something like that, Dragon Tether Calculator. I'm not quite sure, but if you type it into Google, you'll be able to find it quite easily. And if you then insert your FF logs, like the link to your FF logs log that you just, like the fight that you just did, it will calculate which target would have been the best to give your Dragon Sight to in a certain phase of the fight. In general, just give it to the strongest player on your team, or the person that has the most burst at certain points. But if you really want to min-max who the best person would be for your Dragon Sight, there is that website out there that will calculate it for you. In general, I'll just give it to whoever I think has the most damage or who has the most gear in the party or something like that. And then last but not, and that's on 2 minutes. And then last but not least, we have Lance Charge, aka the old Blood of the Dragon, which, spoiler alert, I'm going to be saying Blood of the Dragon quite often instead of Lance Charge, most likely, because it's been called Blood of the Dragon for like the last 6 years. So yeah, that's why I'll probably mispronounce it as Blood of the Dragon instead of Lance Charge. And that is a personal buff on a 90-second duration. Now, the way Dragoon flows is you basically have two different segments. You have a 30-second Blood of the Dragon like rotation, and then you go into a 30-second Life of the Dragon rotation. Now, the cool thing is that because Dragoon can kind of play around when they go into Life of the Dragon, you can actually delay Life of the Dragon by one cycle every now and then, allowing you to have like a 1-minute Blood of the Dragon window and then a 1-minute Life of the Dragon window. In most cases, you're not really going to be doing this too much. You'll see me do it in the opener because of like how it works. But in a normal dummy scenario, you only do it once basically, and then it always aligns itself with the raid buffs. in an actual fight with downtime, this is something that you could use. For example, say you had half a minute of downtime, and it means that immediately going into Life of the Dragon might not be a good idea because you still have like 30 seconds left on like your lance charge or something else. Then you could delay it in an actual fight as well. If you're trying it on a dummy, you only have to delay the first usage of Life of the Dragon. If you're doing it in an actual fight that has substantial downtime, it might be better to delay it every now and then, depending on how your buffs and your raid buffs line up with that Life of the Dragon window. So just know that it's possible. The way why it is possible is like follows. So Dragoon has jumps. The only jump that interacts with your Blood of the Dragon gauge is high jump, or the normal jump, the upgraded version, because every time you use high jump you get a 15-second dive ready buff. As long as this buff is active, you can use a skill called Mirage Dive, and when you use Mirage Dive you get a stack of, I believe it's called Eyes Open, on your Blood of the Dragon gauge. And if you have 2 stacks, using Gyrus Kogel will transform your Blood of the Dragon into Life of the Dragon. Now, because it is a 15-second buff that you get, as long as you have that buff you can use your Mirage Dive, it means that you can use your Gyrus Kogel before using your Mirage Dive, and if you do that, you basically push back your Life of the Dragon window by half a minute. Because your jump is on a half a minute cooldown, and your Gyrus Kogel is on half a minute cooldown, meaning that it's totally possible to do this without losing anything. So that's kind of why it is possible to delay your Life of the Dragon in order to better align it with raid buffs. Another important thing about your Life of the Dragon phase is that your Star Diver, which is your hardest hitting skill, you always want to be hitting this under a buff or under a raid buff. So that's why sometimes you'll see me wait quite long with using this inside the Life of the Dragon phase, because I'm basically waiting for my raid buffs or my personal buffs to align with this buff, because you never want to hit a Star Diver outside of raid buffs, unless of course you don't have any raid buffs at that point or personal buffs. But if possible, always try to hit Star Diver underneath a buff like Dragon Sight, like Blood of the Dragon, or something else. One cool thing as well with Dragon Sight, since Dragon Sight is 2 minutes and all your jumps are on a 30-second, 60-second and 2-minute cooldown, you're basically always going to be able to use all of your jumps underneath Dragon Sight. Now, because of what I said at the start of the video, because my GCD is kind of fucked and I'm going to be delaying my jumps here and there, I'll start to misalign my jumps with my Dragon Sight because of that reason. But yeah, that's pretty much all of the theory behind Dragoon. Let's put it into practice now. As always, the opener will be on top of the screen if you want to follow along at home. So, let's get started. Now, one quick thing as well, if you want to use a potion, use the potion pre-pull, because since Shadowbringers we don't have access to heavy thrust anymore, so we basically lost that one free GCD, I guess you could say, meaning that if you want to use a potion, you'll need to use it pre-pull instead of during, like just right after that heavy thrust. Now, as I also said, we're going to be delaying our first Life of the Dragon usage, so when my high jump comes up again, you'll see that I'm going to be using Gyrus Kogel before I use my Mirage Dive to get that second dive ready stack. Now, I'm going to be clipping my GCD here a tiny bit, because otherwise my jumps are going to be looking a bit weird further down the line. So as you can see, we use Gyrus Kogel before the Mirage Dive, thus delaying our Life of the Dragon cycle by 30 seconds. And then our Gyrus Kogel is going to be coming up in just a little bit, meaning that we can go into that Life of the Dragon cycle. And then of course we don't want to be using our Mirage Dive before we go into that Life of the Dragon cycle, because otherwise we're going to be essentially losing a stack of Eyes Open, and we really don't want to lose those because that will cost us in the long run. Now of course we're going to be waiting until Blood of the Dragon is up, or Lance Charge is up, before we do end up using our Star Diver. And there we go. Now, since we now have 2 stacks again, it means that we can immediately go into the next instance of Life of the Dragon, and this is really good because our Dragon Sight is about to come up, meaning that we'll be able to use our Dragon Sight to empower 2 of our Nestrons, which is why I'm going to be delaying one of the Nestrons right now, and why we'll also be able to get the next Star Diver underneath all of our raid buffs. Now, our this Nestrons, the last one that we're going to be using, is going to be very tight into our window because we did have to use it super late. So I'm going to be using it here. Oh, I actually missed it. So that's a little bit unfortunate. But yeah, I should have used that a little bit earlier so that I would have still been able to get it in there. But it just happened, so rip. I could have technically also delayed my my gyroscope over like a GCD to make it a little bit easier to hit it underneath that buff. And there we go. Next Life of the Dragon cycle coming up. For this one, we are going to be having our Lance Charge again, so we're going to be delaying our Star Diver by a little bit. We're also going to be having our, what's it called again? This thing, Battle Litany. So that is why we also delayed our Nestron by a little bit. Just gonna get it in there last second. If possible, always try to delay your Nestron a little bit if there's any raid buffs coming up or any personal buffs. Of course, if you delay it too long like I did at the first or the second Life of the Dragon cycle and you miss the Nestron, then definitely don't do it. But if you can get away with delaying it so that you can get it underneath an extra buff, it's definitely worth doing. If it screws over your buff alignment and stuff, then, or you miss a usage, then definitely don't delay it. And here we go into yet another Life of the Dragon. And this will be the last one that I show, because otherwise we're going to be here for quite a bit longer. So we're going to be using our Dragon Sight. Can use our Star Diver now because we're buffed. And then the next two Nestrons will also fall underneath that buff. And then here, of course, we have all of our jumps. As I said before, our jumps always should be underneath that Dragon Sight buff. As you can see, we're going to be missing our last jump here, because we have other stuff that is more important to keep on cooldown. Of course, if I would have been able to double weave it, it would have been a lot easier. But unfortunately enough, I can't, so it's a little bit rip. But yeah, that's pretty much Dragoon. The rotation keeps flowing like this. Of course, Dragoon has a 6-minute full rotation when it comes to their buff windows. But in general, we're not going to be delaying a single Life of the Dragon phase anymore. Because we basically, like, you only really need to delay the first one. And all of the other Life of the Dragon phases will align with buffs. As you can see, this one does not align with any buffs that we personally have. But because all of our buffs are still 60 seconds out, we're not going to be missing any DPS by using our Life of the Dragon right here. Because everything is still 60 seconds away, and if we like fast forward 60 seconds, then basically everything would line up again for the next Life of the Dragon phase anyways. Actually, I might as well just like do the full 6 minutes, why not? So as you can see, we have a Life of the Dragon coming up in about 25 seconds. All of our buffs and raid buffs are also about 25 seconds away. So that's why everything will line up just quite nicely again. Of course, my jump is going to be a little bit misaligned with my Dragon Sight, which is kind of unfortunate. But that's just the way it is with how like my delaying is with the stupid skill speed that I have right now. So there we go, into Life of the Dragon. We have our Dragon Sight, we have our Lance Charge, meaning that we can use our Star Diver underneath all of our buffs. And then also all of the jumps should be up here again. Of course, my jumps are still a little bit on cooldown. But you'll be able to pretty much use all of your burst inside all of your raid buffs. As you can see, this one barely missed the Dragon Sight, but everything else was able to hit inside all of the raid buffs quite nicely. So that's pretty much Dragoon. It's a relatively simple job when you first look at it. If you just use everything on cooldown, it feels relatively simple as well, but when you go into optimizing your DPS a little bit more with like giving your Dragon Sight to the right person, delaying your Life of the Dragon cycles depending on downtime into the fight, it can get quite a bit more interesting to play. And even though it's a relatively simple concept, it is still a relatively engaging job to play as well, which is why it stays so fun. So that's going to be it for me. I hope you learned something new, and I'll see you in the next one.